I just don't know where to begin with this televisual butchering of such a well-known and classic Gothic horror story. I just really don't know. Hello, YouTube. Film Buffo 6 here. Coming your way with a review / super rant on the piece of shit 2006 TV movie adaptation of Bram Stoker's classic vampire horror story Dracula, which was initially broadcast on BBC One as part of the Christmas schedules on the 28th of December 2006, was adapted for the small screen by television writer Stewart Harcourt, who also wrote episodes of Miss Marple and Poirot, was directed by Bill Eagles, who also directed episodes of such US TV shows as CSI, Cold Case, Battlestar Galactica, Terminator, The Sarah Connor Chronicles, and Fringe, and is also well known for directing a small British independent crime film in 2000 titled Beautiful Creatures, which starred Susan Lynch and Rachel Weisz, and it stars Marc Warren, who, if you don't know him, he guest starred as Elton Pope in one of the worst ever Doctor Who episodes, which is 2006's Love and Monsters, of course. He plays Count Dracula in this. Sophia Myles, who of course is best known to Doctor Who fans for her role as Madame de Pompadour in the 2006 episode The Girl in the Fireplace, and who, believe it or not, actually dated David Tennant around the time this film was made. She plays Lucy Westenra. Stephanie Leonidas, who guest starred in the likes of Doc Martin, Holby City, The Bill, and Whitechapel, as Mina Murray. Timothy Spall's son, Rafe, who featured in such films including the Cornetto trilogy, One Day, and Prometheus, as Jonathan Harker. Tom Burke, who most recently featured in The Musketeers opposite Peter Capaldi, as who played Cardinal Richelieu, as well as a supporting role in The Invisible Woman alongside Ralph Fiennes. Tom Burke plays Dr. John Seward in this. Donald Sumpter, who previously worked with David Suchet in the Poirot story, The ABC Murders, as well as featured in the 1968 Doctor Who story, The Wheel in Space alongside Patrick Troughton's Doctor, and in the 1972 story The Sea Devils alongside John Pertwee's Doctor. Playing Lord Arthur Homewood is Dan Stevens, who is best known nowadays for his role as Matthew Crawley in Downton Abbey, and as Professor Abraham Van Helsing is Hercule Poirot himself, Mr. David Suchet. Now, the plot of this version of the classic Dracula story is that Lord Arthur Homewood, played by Dan Stevens, finds out that he has contracted syphilis, the same disease that has just killed his father, just after he has become engaged to the beautiful Lucy Westenra, played by Sophia Myles. And as a result of this, once he gets married to her, he cannot consummate their marriage properly because he doesn't want to infect Lucy with this dreaded disease. So in desperation to find a cure, he contacts a secret religious cult headed up by this guy named Alfred Singleton, who is a character who doesn't even feature in the book, played by Donald Sumpter, and he persuades Jonathan Harker, played by Rafe Spall, to travel all the way to Transylvania and secure a deal with a mysterious 900-year-old Romanian nobleman named Count Dracula, played by Marc Warren, to come to England in order to cure Arthur of his debilitating disease. For the Count apparently has extraordinary powers. However, there is a sinister origin behind these powers, as it turns out that Dracula is in fact a vampire who is preying on the female population of England, infecting them with his diseased blood, and is converting them into undead creatures like himself. Now, upon realizing his terrifying mistake, Arthur relies on the help of the world-famous Dutch vampire expert, Professor Abraham Van Helsing, to help him get rid of this blood-sucking fiend once and for all. Once and for all. Doesn't really sound in any way like the same plot description from the book, does it? So, what are my thoughts on Dracula 2006 upon seeing it for the first time in almost 8 years since it was first broadcast? I'm just speechless, just completely lost for words. I mean, what could I possibly say about this? I mean, this really has to be the worst adaptation the worst adaptation of this classic horror story that I have ever seen. I mean, how could the BBC, who have given us such a consistently brilliant back catalogue of TV period drama over the years, such as Cranford, Lark Rise to Candleford, Call the Midwife, Ripper Street, the 2004 adaptation of North and South with Richard Armitage, the 1999 adaptation of David Copperfield with a relatively young Daniel Radcliffe, and even the classic 1995 adaptation of Pride and Prejudice with Jennifer Ely and Colin Firth, to name a few. How did they manage to royally, fuck up this adaptation? It's as if either the filmmakers didn't really have the time that was possibly needed to develop any of the themes that made the book such a compelling read, or develop any of the characters, or more likely just didn't give a shit, sleepwalked their way through production, and just wanted to get this thing out there in time for broadcasting during the Christmas holidays as quickly as they possibly could. That's how extremely rushed and ultimately lazy this production is. The BBC, even had the nerve, the gall, and the absolute audacity to falsely advertise this load of nonsensical hogwash on their website with such an intelligence-insulting statement to hardcore fans of the source material who were really anticipating to see this new adaptation, which somehow reads like this. Returning to the original novel for his inspiration, Stewart Harcourt's script draws both on elements of Bram Stoker's own life and elements of Victorian society to give this version of the vampire classic Dracula a new and modern sensibility. I call bullshit to that because what you really have here is a production that is badly written, is rottenly directed, and is acted by people whose woodenness is just enough to give you massive splinters. Now technically it is quite impressive from a technical standpoint. The photography is decent at best, despite some strange lighting at times. Also the production design and set design and costumes look fabulous, and the score is good, decent, but not really great or even that memorable. But sadly, even those couldn't save this film, unfortunately. Bill Eagles's direction is incredibly bland and incredibly lifeless. The acting is simply atrocious. I know some people say that, that Sophia Myles, she was the best actor out of the lot of them, or or stuff like that. But really, in my opinion, she is good eye candy. I'll give her that. But really, this is not one of her best performances, I'm afraid. I thought she was better in The Girl in the Fireplace, to be perfectly honest. And I also honestly think that Myles and Stephanie Leonidas should have really switched roles, because Leonidas as Mina looks more like someone who is more comfortable in a supporting rather than leading role. And even in the leading role, she's not all that convincing, so you end up not rooting for her character, really. Dan Stevens, he should really stick to making Downton Abbey, really. The supporting cast don't really help either. Marc Warren as Count Dracula, he is just horribly miscast, looks completely out of his depth, and looks like he's just wanked into a school sock. I mean, I have to admit, though, that I kind of liked his old age makeup when you see him for the first time, and he looks really old and almost decrepit. I thought he looked really creepy and menacing at first. The only thing I didn't like about the makeup were these dirty fingernails that he had on. They just looked horrible. But when he becomes the younger Dracula, he doesn't look all that threatening, and he looks more like Harry Styles out of One Direction if he had a really bad hair day and took drugs. Also, unlike all the great actors that have come before him, like Bela Lugosi, Christopher Lee, Jack Palance, Frank Langella, and Gary Oldman, to name a few, Warren just simply doesn't have the charm, the charisma, the magnetism, or even really the sex appeal to pull this iconic character off. Now, David Suchet, I have to admit, he is ideal casting as Van Helsing on paper. But unfortunately, he's just totally wasted in this, and ends up looking more like a Radagast from the Hobbit movies if he had too many magic mushrooms, complete with a fake-looking Father Christmas beard, than an eccentric professor who professes to be a world-famous vampire hunter. The way Stewart Harcourt adapts this story is horrendous, and is in a way akin to how George Lucas wrote the Star Wars prequels, especially The Phantom Menace. It's like Harcourt read the original novel and attempted to do something different with it. Now, look, Look, I'm all for screenwriters and or directors or even filmmakers wanting to do something different with any source material that they are given. That is perfectly fine with me. But with this adaptation, it just doesn't work because Harcourt deviates from the original novel completely to the point where you could hardly recognise this as being a true adaptation of the source material. For example, he omits some very memorable scenes from the novel, like the three brides sequence. He also omits some of the characters, like Quincy Morris and even Renfield, who if you've read the original novel, is an inmate or is the only inmate or is technically the only inmate at a lunatic asylum, who turns out to be a servant working under Dracula's influence. Van Helsing doesn't feature in the story all that much. There is a strange religious cult that seems to be lifted straight out of the Wicker Man, and a nonsensical storyline involving syphilis that feels unnecessarily shoehorned. Most of the dialogue from the original novel is completely non-existent here. And even in the original novel, Jonathan Harker survives his traumatic encounter with Dracula and his three brides in Transylvania and lives to help kill the Count, if that makes any sense. But in this version, he is abruptly killed off whilst he is in Transylvania, and is thus nowhere to be seen throughout the rest of the film. What the fuck? Anyway, the film is also edited in a really haphazard way, in really the style of an MTV music video, which ultimately makes the experience of watching this film just downright awful and an absolute chore. Also, the pacing of this film is just terrible. I mean, even though it lasts just as long as a regular episode of Sherlock, it feels simultaneously rushed as fuck and at the same time boring, really boring, because apart from the scene where Dracula seduces and ultimately kills Lucy, until the last 15 minutes, nothing actually happens in this film, apart from just a mess of fanfiction bullshit and really, really bad, really, really, cringe-worthy acting. The ending. The ending especially is just horrible and is just a blatantly huge middle finger to the hardcore fans of the source material. Spoiler alert, by the way. Firstly, in the original novel, the final confrontation between Dracula and the group, consisting of Van Helsing, Mina, Jonathan, and Quincy Morris, and not including Dr. Seward and Lord Homewood, took place back in Dracula's castle, back in Transylvania, not in London. Secondly, Dracula doesn't just get killed with a stake driven right through his heart like this. Instead, his throat gets slashed, and then he is stabbed through the heart with just a simple hunter's knife. And thirdly, the last ever shot of this film, when we see the older Dracula amongst all the homeless people, what was even the point of that? I mean, in the novel, after he is killed, Dracula stays dead and doesn't find a way of returning. And B, were the filmmakers really that fucking confident that they were going to make a sequel to this? Fuck this shit. Seriously. Fuck it. If you want a good adaptation of Dracula, just please go and watch Nosferatu from 1922, Bram Stoker's Dracula from 1992, the 1958 Hammer horror film version with Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing, or even the classic 1931 version, because here you are never going to find that. Nor do I even recommend this bullshit as even a good TV production in general. I'm sorry, but that's a sad fact, really. My overall rating for Dracula 2006 is a marginally generous 2 out of 10. But really, in all seriousness, all that I have left to say about this film is, like Count Dracula himself, this film deserves to have a stake driven through its cold, lazy, piss-poor, uncaring heart. Fuck this piece of shit adaptation of Dracula to the depths of hell. Now, feel free to leave a comment in the section below and let me know your thoughts on Dracula 2006, and also let me know who your favourite Dracula is. Plus, feel free to subscribe to my channel. And until my next video, which is going to be my YouTube movie deal tag video. Yes, it's coming. Do take care, everyone, and goodbye.